This is group 6 and the topic number is number 4, review of legislative frameworks and laws for gender equality in the labor market. So this section is focuses on the general legislative framework in the Philippines, the laws that promote women's access to work, the laws that constraints ability to work, and the laws that improve women's work conditions. So, first is legislative framework. What is legislative framework? Legislative framework is promoting and supporting women's work requires a strong overall legislative framework that guarantees equality and non-discrimination and that expressly provides for temporary special measures. The Philippines has ratified 34 ILO convention and is party to all of fundamental United Nations human rights conference and conventions.
Promoting women's access to work. Promoting access to work and enhancing employment opportunities for women. Legislation and policies that guarantee gender equality and eliminate gender discrimination are fundamental to ensuring that women are not disadvantaged in employment and occupation. Law and policy need to work together in the balanced way to provide adequate protection for decent work standards while also ensuring sufficient flexibility to promote employment opportunities. Promoting access to work and enhancing employment opportunities for women also requires balancing the functions of social protection and gender equality with economic efficiency considerations. Policies and legislation based on the social dialogue are best able to accommodate the interests of both employers and workers in a dynamic global market. Furthermore, employment equality means more than treating people in the same way. It also requires special measures and accommodation of differences. For instance, good employment equality practice requires measures to enable both men and women to reconcile work responsibilities with family obligations. Furthermore, women's representation in workplace, including higher echelons of job categories and company leadership position, varies across companies in G7 countries. Companies in Canada and United States and Japan have the lowest proportion of women in the workers. In France and Italy, this proportion improved as women more into higher level positions such as directorships, while these numbers are low for Japan across all levels. The greatest challenge to companies in G7 countries in this area in the promotion of women to executive and senior management position.
Employment and recruitment services. It is a pivotal tool to promote women's access to work. It is a strong and effective employment agency framework. Agencies should have access to information about a country's overall employment strategy, including its trade and investment priorities.
Short-term contract. The duly issued Department Order Number 18-4 dated 14th of November 2011. The short-term contracts is a legislation that reduces employer obligation and provide benefits and protection that apply to permanent employees. It balances employer legitimate need for flexibility with workers' equally legitimate demand for stability and protection. It provides rights to our workers such as right to have holidays, leave, social security benefits, and termination right.
Limiting constraints on work for women. Access to resources. It is important to identify the particular constraints that women face in accessing resources, such as land and finances, and to note that collecting community and private ownership market-based solutions are necessary to overcome such constraints. Increasing women access to such resources will help improve their productivity and income. A legislative framework in conjunction with appropriate employment policies, codes, and guidelines may best redress the multiple levels of disadvantage suffered by women. There are examples of good practice legislative provisions in the Philippines, but the implementation falls short. The government should also monitor the effectiveness of its policy implementation, which would include collection of six disaggregated data. To work toward providing women with equal access to land and credit, the Philippines should identify women's need for a resource, identify the particular constraints women face accessing the resource, and reasons women are not achieving equitable access to the resource. Address such constraints through a legislative framework in a conjunction with appropriate policies, codes, and guidelines, including gender mainstreaming. Develop specific targets with the practical strategies to address the constraints. Deploy collective community or private ownership market-based solutions depending on the situation, and monitor and assess the effectiveness of implementation, which would include collection of sex disaggregated data.
Family Responsibilities ADB and ILO 2013b. Legislative measures are required to enable both men and women to reconcile work responsibilities with family obligation. Women often lack access to fertility control information and services that would enable them to plan if and when to have a child. Good legislative practice include legislative guarantee to promote and protect women's reproductive health and rights and ensure that women have to access to reproductive health service. The prime responsibility to ensure that the development of child care service should lie with government, though this does not necessarily mean that government itself must provide this service. The Republic Act 10354 enables women to freely choose whether or when they have a child. The National EECD provides social protection, nutrition, and other services for child, and this policy is to promote increased investment in our country poverty reduction goals and mainstreaming.
improving women's working conditions. It is for legislative good practice measures can significantly improve women's work conditions. First is to ensure that the international standard of equal remuneration for work of equal value is applied both in legislation and in practice. Second is to ensure that women have effective compliant mechanism to address discrimination in the workplace, including sexual harassment. The third is a strong and efficient labor inspectorate which effectively monitors and enforces legislative measures. And fourth is a strong and effective social dialogue mechanism is required to ensure women participation.
Equal pay and minimum wages. Many international enshrine the notion of equal remuneration for work of equal value. The interrelationship among equal remuneration, wage setting, and application of national minimum wages and reducing minimum wages and reducing employment inequality between the sexes is increasingly recognized. Some work type may not be identical and indeed may be different, but nonetheless, the work may be equal value and should equally remunerated. There are 10 factors are to be considered when setting wages according to Article 124 of the Labor Code. While domestic workers are now protected under the 2013 Workers Act, Article 98 of the Labor Code is still exclude home workers because these jobs are mostly undertaken by women. Moreover, when the minimum wages is increased in a particular region, domestic workers are not included in the wage increase.
Compliant mechanism is a good practice indicates that compliant mechanism to address discrimination in employment and work should be clear, simple, efficient, and low cost.
Labor inspector. The objective of the labor inspection is to further strengthen the implementation of the visitorial and enforcement power under the Labor Code, as renumber towards securing a higher level of compliance with labor laws and standards and ensuring continuity and sustainability of compliance at workplace. For this purpose, the Secretary of Labor and Employment delegates this function to the regional offices with the assurance of a list of labor inspectors who are given the authority of conduct inspection which covers all private establishments including their branches and workplace in the regions. The regional office through the labor inspectors enforce labor laws and social legislation through the conduct of routine inspection, complaint inspection, and occupational safety and health investigation. Upon the discretion of the Secretary, special inspections may be conducted as may be deemed necessary.
Social dialogue and trade unions. The term social dialogue covers the consultation between workers and employment working conditions. It extends to negotiation, consultation, or exchange information. The ILO especially promotes social dialogue as means of achieving dissent. The Philippines is taking significant steps to foster tripartite mechanism and as well as bipartite mechanism. The government continued to develop tripartite industrial peace council. As of 2010, 100 tripartite industrial peace councils had been created. The PIEP noted a decline in union membership and a general decline in annual union registration from 2004 to 2009. The ILO suggests that this decline may be due to growing numbers of short terms. The ILO also noted that these matters need to be subject of continued social dialogue. Good practice indicates that the government should lead way through the use of labor clauses in public contracts which could certain target for movement.